And we're live for the latest edition of Nick Valencia Live. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, and we've got a really big show planned for you here. Somebody who I've been trying to get on the show for quite some time, somebody who I met while I was on my trip to Washington, D.C. at the Pew Research Center. We have Dr. He just got his PhD, Jemar Tisby. He's author, he's a writer, he's a producer. He is a theologian. Did I say that word right? I don't think so. Theologian? There we go. I got it out this time. He joins the show. He's going to be our first guest up. And we also have the past president of the Georgia chapter of the NAACP, attorney at law, Gerald Griggs. He's a fixture in the Atlanta community. A lot of you guys, if you're watching us from Atlanta, you probably crossed paths with him at a demonstration or just out and about. But first, we want to start in Charlotte, where we were over the weekend for a really sort of organic protest that gathered on Friday night. We went to Manolo's Bakery, which was the site of the resistance movement there in Charlotte. And it was a little over a week ago that the owner, Manolo Betancourt, he took to social media and announced that he was going to shut down out of fear of being raided by ICE. And you remember from our reporting, we had told you, according to eyewitnesses, those suspected federal agents, or we should just call them feds, we know they were there. Those feds were driving down the street, driving down East Charlotte and other parts of the area, basically intimidating people if they weren't targeting people. They were going into the small businesses that cater to the Latino community. And at Manolo's Bakery, they were just sort of hovering around the parking area. And that's when he decided to close. And because of that, the community, something beautiful happened. They rallied around Manolo. And on Friday night, I met some people there who had really taken exception to ICE being on the streets and had stood up and decided to use their voice. And one of them was a teacher named Lindsay Smith. And Lindsay told me something that was absolutely heartbreaking. She has 2 classes. Across those classes, she has 43 students. And because of ICE being in the city, she said last week, only a handful of her students showed up.
Does your daughter know why she's out here?
She's 2, so not really. But my kindergartner does know. I'm a teacher, and so I teach right around here. And my classroom has been empty all week, and it's heartbreaking.
Oh my gosh, your classroom has been empty out of fear.
Yeah. Are Latino students. So one day between 43 students in 2 classes, I had 5 students. And they just felt afraid, and no one should feel afraid to walk out their front door. No one should feel afraid to go to school. So that's why I'm here to support all my students and their families and our whole Latino community.
And it's not just the undocumented community that is at fear of being targeted. It's American citizens with brown skin. And it was also at that same rally on Friday night outside of Manolo's that I met a mother named Priscilla Rangel. And she was telling me that her 6-year-old son asked her to stay home from school last Monday. He was worried that he would be targeted. And because of that, he asked her to play out a scenario if that happened and what he would do and what he should do if ICE ever came to ask him to prove that he was an American citizen. These are the kinds of conversations that are happening in households all across America. And Charlotte was just the latest city to catch the ire of President Trump. It is sadness, and there's a lot of dark times happening around this country, but there is a lot of light, and we've talked about it in the show, that light shines in the darkest spaces. And it was in Charlotte that we met somebody who turned into an accidental organizer. She's been an activist for a long time, but nothing quite like this. And we want to play you the profile of the person that we met there, Mrs. Beth Clements.
I'm out here because they shut down a fat woman's bakery. Listen, don't shut down my bakery. I like cake.
We're in Charlotte, North Carolina to meet with the accidental activist, Beth Clements.
I have been out here since 9 o'clock this morning in front of this bakery. And now it's a party and the kids have shown up. ICE, just leave Charlotte, okay? Please.
It's just been terrorizing for this city. I use that bakery because of my foster kids. My foster kids are from Central, South America, and Mexico. They're unaccompanied minors, and Manolo makes them a taste of their home. The first little girl we had, her head was shaved. And I was like, well, that's the way she likes it. That's not the way she likes it. They shaved her head so she didn't get sexually assaulted on the way up here, and they dressed her like a boy. It's not a road trip to America, and then they just stay for shits and giggles. They fight to get here.
But this is the first day that we've seen a flag and a sign from the kids. Look at this, my heart. Woo!
when you were hurting that bakery, when you were hurting my city, you were hurting my babies too.
If President Trump was sitting here right next to you and you had the chance to have his ear,
I would not be able to form complete sentences that would not get me thrown in Gitmo.
what's your message to the people of Charlotte?
Oh, you beautiful bastards.
Why do you think the Trump administration focused their ire on North Carolina?
Some people conspiracy theory?
Yeah, I want to know what you really think.
What I really think is this summer, Trump came to the NASCAR race in Charlotte, and Hendricks of Hendricks, Auto, he gave money to Trump in his campaign. USA! USA! When Trump and Hendricks were in the luxury box at the NASCAR race, I think it was a handshake deal. I'll give you this $2 million for these vehicles, and that pays you back for what you gave me in my campaign. And they shook hands, and Charlotte was just in the middle. And I hope what the next poor city who has to do this, who is next terrorized by Border Patrol, what I hope they take from what Charlotte did is hold your Latino community close and bring them together, and they will show you how to love.
There's some people that you just meet that touch your heart, and some people that that are special. And Beth Clements is one of those people. Her and her husband, Kyle Clements, they've been out there in front of the bakery every single day, rallying the community. On Friday night, when I caught up with her, she was just blushing and gushing because she said, I didn't plan this. This just happened on its own. And there was literally hundreds, if not thousands of people out there on Friday night. There is a lot of hope in Charlotte, and that's one of the themes that I picked up on. But even with all this hope, we're still seeing people getting picked up off the streets. We're still seeing the Kavanaugh stops of people being targeted simply because of the color of their skin. There is a sense that justice is not prevailing for some. So we wanted to drill down on this and have a conversation about the spirit of justice. And no better to have that conversation with than Jemar Tisby. Jemar, welcome to Nick Valencia Live. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you are doing as a journalist. Us historians often call journalism the first draft of history. We are drawing on your work when we go to the archives 30, 40, 50 years later and beyond. And it's because of the work like you're doing that we have something to look at. So I appreciate you.
God bless you, man. There's that moment when you're in the field and you're, as a journalist, that like something is historic and you're there right before the moment becomes historic. I'm getting goosebumps, like literally I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about these moments that have happened in my career where it is historic. And I went back to when you went on your book tour, the first stop on your book tour last year, and you were talking about we live in these historic times. And it was this theme in this speech that you did, or this presentation on the spirit of justice. What does the spirit of justice mean to you?
So as a historian, it's pretty depressing, the work that I do, and looking back at history, all the missed opportunities, and particularly with my focus around racial justice, you get a lot more bad news than good news. And unfortunately, the bad things that people do to one another, that's relatively commonplace. But to me, what's remarkable is that no matter what the opposition, no matter what the injustice, there are always people willing to rise up and resist it. And so I started thinking, what is that thing, that thing in human beings, even just a small group that says, this is not okay, and we're going to do something about it. And I call that the spirit of justice.
So I think that there is more good in humanity than bad, right? I mean, I use the sort of car on the freeway analogy. If we had more bad people, there'd be a lot more accidents. The fact that we could operate these like heavy machines and that we're not crashing into each other every other, mile that we go. Has history shown, though, that mankind is partial to violence and to wanting to other?
History shows that power is a tool that can be used for good or for harm. And unfortunately, a lot of times the people in power choose to use it in ways that consolidate more power and more wealth for themselves. And so what we see throughout history is the dichotomy between oppressor and oppressed. One of the things that I often say is that justice takes sides. Justice takes sides, by which I mean that when you have a situation of injustice between groups of people, not really one-on-one, but between groups of people, there's typically an oppressor and an oppressed. The oppressor has the money, the political power, the guns, the tanks, and the oppressed typically don't. And they
Right.
are resisting for their very humanity. And so what we see throughout history is this struggle between oppressor and oppressed. And the reality is that a lot of times the oppressor wins the day in the short term, but the oppressed, who have this spirit of justice, never give up and never stop resisting.
You talked about a story of a woman that you met whose husband was killed, and then she was sitting there and giving this testimony, and then this press conference afterwards, while the weapon that was used to murder her husband was in the room, and just the power of that. I want to play. It's a little bit of a long clip, but if you stay with me, it's from your speech on the spirit of justice last year. It's about a 3-minute clip. Let's watch it.
Was said, I'm a historian, and we're living in historic times. A lot of times we're witnessing history as it's happening. And I got to do that one time in particular that I'll never forget. It was December 9th, 2017. And it was the grand opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. Now, this was a big deal. It was shrouded in a lot of controversy. Number one, because the state of Mississippi is crafting a museum about the history of civil rights. So the conversation was, are they going to whitewash it? Are they going to downplay this ugly history? Because a lot of it took place in Mississippi. Well, they didn't. They did a great job. It's very hard-hitting, truth-telling. But the other issue at the grand opening was who was coming. So the governor at the time, Phil Bryant, invited the president at the time, Donald Trump, and a lot of people didn't like that. Whatever your politics are, but they thought, well, this is kind of a contradiction, what the museum is standing for and what it appears like this person stands for. And so there were some dignitaries that chose not to come. They were invited to speak, but then they rescinded. John Lewis, the legendary civil rights leader and congressperson from Georgia, he backed out. Benny Thompson, who you may remember was the chair of the January 6th committee recently, and he was representative for the district where the Civil Rights Museum is in Jackson, Mississippi. He backed out. But another person did end up coming and speaking, and that was Myrlie Evers Williams. So you may remember Myrlie Evers Williams as the widow of Medgar Evers. Her husband was shot and killed on their front doorstep. She's the one who opened the door, sees him lying bleeding in their yard, calls the hospital, is there when he dies. And it didn't occur to me until after the fact that she went through the museum on a private tour, then gave a speech. And at the museum, on display, was the actual rifle that killed her husband. I mean, can you imagine seeing that and then going up and speaking to hundreds of people with national news cameras right there? And she didn't end it there. She held a small press conference that I had the privilege and honor of being present at, and that picture is from that press conference. And I remember early in this maybe 30-minute session, a journalist asked her a question, well, how does now, 21st century, compare to then, the civil rights era? And she said, you know what? It's pretty similar. Not a lot has changed.
God, what a sobering anecdote, Jemar. Is President Trump whitewashing our history right now?
I would go so far as to say there is a war on history coming from the White House. When you look at what this regime is trying to do, it's literally trying to whitewash history. You can go to official government social media accounts, and they're producing these AI images of white men and saying, this is the true American, this is the true labor force, this is what we need to get back to. But in addition, they are going through Smithsonian museums and saying, you have to purge anything that we deem DEI, which is
Yeah.
often simply expanding the aperture of history to tell stories that have largely been ignored or underreported on. And then you see this happening in colleges and universities where professors are being silenced in their very own classrooms or fired. You're seeing this with the defunding of institutions that are charged with telling history, whether national parks or other museums or institutions of that nature. And so we really are at a critical time, especially as we come up on 2026 and the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. There's all this myth making around the nation's founding and what the nation really means. And so there is a war on history, and unfortunately it's coming even from the White House.
They're putting out these parallel realities and acting like artificial intelligence. I mean, I'm thinking of this video that President Trump had with Ronaldo, and he's kicking a soccer ball around in the White House after the visit. And it's they're putting it out. I mean, it's a joke, and they could pass it off. I don't know if it's in good faith, but they could try to say that it's just a joke. But that is sort of a revisionist history. It's a parallel reality, isn't it?
Yeah, to sort of like look at this from a meta narrative kind of thing,
Mm.
the very use of AI, artificial intelligence, to tell these stories is a pretty kind of in your face way of saying, hey, we're making this up. We are inventing this. One of the things that I'm particularly concerned about, I mentioned the 250th anniversary. Well, the White House has partnered with Prager University, which is not a university. It's a right-wing content mill that produces these videos reinforcing culture war talking points. The White House has partnered with them to do some historical storytelling, including these portraits of some of the so-called founding fathers that you can go online, click on these AI videos, and have these founding figures talking. But the talking points are very detached from what historians would call accurate history. And yet that is being promulgated as the official national story. And artificial intelligence is a big part of it. And they're just saying, hey, we're just programming stuff here, making it up, and then putting it out there.
I've seen these videos you're talking about where they like the narrative comes off. It's like slavery wasn't so bad. We saw this take off. I don't know, it was last year, but the year before in one of the midterm election cycles. Oh, well, there was these great skills that slaves learned. They actually came out, these tremendous small business owners. It's just bullshit. But language matters, Jemar.
It absolutely matters. What language does is it forms our moral imagination, and especially language about history, because history isn't just points on a timeline. History is stories we tell ourselves about
Mm.
ourselves. And so history really shapes identity. So the people who control the historical narrative, in some sense, are drastically influencing our concept of self, our self identity, whether as individuals or as a nation. So the words really do matter. And how tragic that we live in an information age, but accurate information is becoming so difficult to come by.
How is important what we're doing? I mean, we met at the Pew Research Center. We were in a room with some of the leading minds in new media in this country, some would argue in this world. And we know why it's important. This isn't baiting. I want to hear why you think what independent journalism means and why it's so important.
So I believe in institutions. I think institutions do a lot of good. They consolidate resources. They have longevity beyond an individual. They can link communities together in a lot of important ways. But we're living in a time where institutions are compromised, whether it's because they're owned by billionaires or they're making deals with billionaires or whatever the case may be. I think you and I have both had experiences with institutions that haven't had our back in truth telling in various ways. So I'm disappointed that that's happening. but I'm also excited because there's opportunity for independent truth telling, independent journalism. Now there are challenges that go with that. It's not all, the slick live show like you're able to produce with your incredible skills and your team, but it's vitally important. I think institutions will make a comeback at some point. But in the meantime, folks like you and the work that we do, it's filling the gap. And so all we're doing is adapting, right? We have these
Right.
tools of new media. And so let's use them to get good information out there. And again, help shape the moral imagination in positive ways.
It really does feel like the institutions are compromised in that, like, every single owner at the top, because we struggle from this disease of individualism, and it's no one's jumping on the grenade to save the masses anymore. Especially at the top, it's almost as though people are just looking out for themselves. People only want what's good and best for them. And, I grew up, and in my household, I was raised to put my arm around the slouched shoulders of society, those members. And I think that's what independent journalism allows me to do. It allows me to control the first draft of history through the lens of the eyes of different people experiencing that history. It's not just the elites. It's not just the victors. And so I ask you, what is it that about this, putting it in our hands and being able to literally draft the first, pen the first draft of history?
I mean, for me, I'm a historian, and so I look much further back than the work that you do. But at the same time, there's a dynamic there, right? Like the historical informs the present day. And
Mhm.
so I have a Substack called Footnotes. It's a top 10 history Substack publication. And just this week, as we record this, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. I posted an article called Klansgiving. And unfortunately, on Thanksgiving Day in 1915, that was the revival of the second draft of the Ku Klux Klan. The first one was right after the Civil War, that kind of fizzled out.
Wow.
But then they revived it. 1915 is the same year that silent film Birth of a Nation came out, which glorified the founding of the Ku Klux Klan as these noble white men taking back the South from northern carpetbaggers and recently freed Black people. And it was also the same year of the lynching of Leo Frank, a Jewish man who was dubiously accused of a rape and murder, and then he was kidnapped from jail and hung. And then just a couple months later, this former white Methodist disgraced preacher named William J. Simmons took a group of his buddies up to the top of Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is the largest Confederate monument in the country, and performed a ceremony. They burned a cross. They built an altar, and on the altar, they put a Bible, an American flag, and a sword.
Hmm.
And I use that to say, what stories are we telling about ourselves on Thanksgiving Day? And what bearing does the past have on the present? Because those symbols, the flag, the Bible, the sword, you can almost transpose them on present day white Christian nationalism.
Absolutely. And the stuff that's done in the name of Christian nationalism, I've started lately, on the advice of those around me, to be louder about my belief in Jesus Christ, because people, for whatever reason, think that Republicans have cornered the market on Jesus, and that only conservatives can have faith. And it really angers me to see people move and sort of try to draft their versions of history in the name of Christ. And it's so opposite of what I was taught, to lead with love and tolerance.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're doing that. Please keep going, because we are in a battle of narratives. The white Christian nationalist narrative said the United States was founded as a Christian nation, by which they mean this narrow, fundamentalist, exclusionary version of religion that
Yeah.
looks nothing like Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're saying that the United States is the apple of God's eye, that among all the nations of the world, the U.S. has a particularly special, honored, exalted place in God's plan, as if we're better than everyone else. And then they are willing to use violence. We have data from places like Pew Research, Public Religion Research Institute, that say people who adhere to white Christian nationalism are more likely to say that violence may be necessary in pursuit of political goals, which we've seen that happen from the very highest level, with the president retweeting sedition and hang them and all those kinds of things. So I want to take back the narrative on what it means to be a faithful Jesus follower, and we cannot let the white Christian nationalists tell their version of it and only their version of it.
And to pick up on that theme of violence, who is it that usually is committing the violence? It's white men. When we look at the statistics of undocumented immigrants, you are more likely, as an undocumented immigrant, to be the victim of a crime than to commit one. That is a fact. That's something that I was very loud about on CNN when I was there, and something that I am very loud about now, because with broad strokes, Jemar, my community is being painted as criminals. We saw the president in 2015, come down the golden escalator and say what he said to rile some people up, but also because he really meant it. While you're here, though, I really want to see where I can look towards in history, if there is a moment of unity between the Black and brown community. One of the things that I really feel is that a step forward in this momentum, in this movement, this social resistance, is taking the lessons learned from the African American community, knowing that Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party and socialist movements. And how can that be applied? How can there be unity? And is there an example of that in history that we can lean on?
I love that, because I really think progress is going to come when people who have been minoritized, we link arms in solidarity. So I look back on, Martin Luther King Jr., of course, is a well-known figure, but both he and Coretta Scott King started talking about this concept of the world house. And they both saw very early on the unity of all people. MLK, in Letter from Birmingham Jail, says, "We're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." So he already knew, like, our struggles are interrelated. But to give you a specific example, MLK was a fan of Cesar Chavez, the union activist, right? And so they were sort of pen pals. I don't believe they ever met in person, but they exchanged letters and telegrams. And so in one particular exchange, King wrote to Chavez that our struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and humanity. And he goes on to say, King to Chavez, that you and your fellow workers have demonstrated your commitment to righting grievous wrongs forced upon exploited people. We are together with you in spirit and in determination that our dreams for a better tomorrow will be realized.
Yes. Letter from a Birmingham jail. Is that not where we got the famous line, injustice for one is injustice for all? I mean, I'm sure I butchered that, but he was writing to the Black clergy in the South saying, hey, I got time today, man. I'm telling you why I am in this struggle and why I commit myself to this struggle.
100%. He see it. And really anyone who's working for justice, it's very specific, it's very contextual, but you very quickly understand that the dynamics of justice and injustice, oppressor and oppressed, are similar worldwide. So I've been to conflict spaces throughout the globe: Belfast in Northern Ireland, Palestine and Israel, South Africa and apartheid, and the US South. And when you look at it, we have so much in common in our struggle against wrong and trying to do right.
God, and I think still back, I look at the stories that stand out to me, like getting my hair cut by Marquise, who's like, look, I'm not out in the streets for you, because where were you guys for me in 2020? Where were the brown people for Black people in 2020? Seeing something on my comment section in Instagram saying, hey, driving while brown, we've been telling you guys about that for years. What about us? And so I guess that's what I ask. I'm curious. I'm not baiting here. I'm like really trying to fish for answers and how we can move past are you going to stand shoulder to shoulder with us, or are you going to stand on business about being right? Because I'm sure you were screaming into a void. The Black struggle, look, I understand it more having lived in the South for the last 20 years in Atlanta. were literally my best friends. I didn't have an option of going to hang out with people like me. I ended up hanging out with the black people, right? Like, this is just what it was. But I just see this friction. I see this, Jemar, where it's like, what's missing? How do we link that? How do we really make that bridge?
There is a friction. And, I'm thankful that I grew up in a working class, blue collar town with a lot of Black folks and a lot of Latino folks. I grew up hearing Spanglish where I was and learning all the curse words and the words you're not supposed to say, but it also was normal. That was my reality. And so I think it also has to start very, very young. With adults, it's so much harder to unlearn stuff than to get it right the first time. And so we have to be really intentional about where we're sending our kids to school, what barbers or beauty salons are they going to get cultural experiences, what festivals and cultural events, right? So just because it's Black centered doesn't mean it's Black only. Like, you can go and experience that. So that's some very baseline stuff. On a more theoretical level, we've got to get away from the idea that proximity to whiteness is the goal. Because
thank you.
What I'm saying? Because what is so often the wedge between different groups is they're trying to get closer to whiteness, whether aesthetically, politically, financially, culturally, in order to gain some of the resources, right? In order to gain some of the
privileges.
Yes, exactly. And until we flip that sort of equation and say it's about dignity, it's about humanity, honestly, it's about redefining or defining in a more true sense what it means to be an American, then we're always going to be scrambling to get favor from this group, right? And in so doing, we're actually going to be working at cross purposes with one another. So how can we come together and say, like, whiteness is not the goal. Human dignity is. And honestly, when people who have been historically disenfranchised and oppressed, when we are able to get the rights we deserve, everybody benefits. So it's not anti-white, it's pro-human.
You're such a beautiful soul, Jemar. I like, literally, I was attracted to you in the Pew Research Center. Like, that's why we ended up breaking bread together. We literally sat, it was you, myself, the director of religion and policy at Pew, and we sat there, and it was just such a beautiful moment to connect, man. I had such a good time meeting you. I've had such a great conversation. I end every interview by asking, is there anything I haven't asked you that you think's important to know? Anything that you'd like to talk about? Now's your chance.
Well, I talk about this stuff on a weekly basis on my brand new reimagined podcast, The Justice Briefing. I break down current events from a not culture war context, back to what we were talking about before, that white Christian nationalists aren't the only voices out there. So on the Justice Briefing, I am trying to give you a perspective at the intersection of faith, history, and justice that you might not always hear. And you can subscribe to that wherever you get your podcasts, as well as every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on Substack Live.
I could listen to you for hours. That like NPR-ish voice, I love it.
Likewise.
Jemar Tisby, author, writer, producer, historian, all around amazing individual. Thank you so much for taking the time. Nick Valencia Live. Come back anytime.
Thank you.
You got it. That was Jemar Tisby, one of the many awesome individuals that I met on my trip to the Pew Research Center. And we have a lot more from Pew coming out. In fact, it was yesterday that they put out some new statistics that showed that a majority of Latinos in this country, 7 in 10, feel that they are worse off. And that includes Latinos who voted for Trump. We have those statistics. We've got graphs we're going to show you. And we're going to have a member of the Latino division, somebody that deals a lot with the community, of reaching out to, get those statistics and connect with the panel of research. I don't know what you call them, panelists, whatever you call them. They're doing smart stuff over there. And we're going to have a guest next week. We won't be live here for Thursday, but we'll have Pew coming up very soon. We pivot now to our next guest, who was the past president here of the Georgia chapter of the NAACP. Led it for a number of years. I saw him out in the streets. You may have seen him as well. He was a fixture and still is in those demonstrations and those pro-democracy movements. Let's take a listen to Gerald Griggs' departing message as he left and stepped down as president.
Hey, everybody, it's Attorney Gerald Griggs, 13th president of the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP. And I just want to take this moment as I transition from the current president to the previous president of the Georgia NAACP to thank everybody that saw fit to allow me to lead as a Georgia State Conference president. This has been an amazing 3.5 years as a state conference president. We've come to some immediate, extensive heights, and we've seen some lows, but we've all gotten through it together. And so I just want to thank each and every member of the Georgia State Conference for their confidence in the Georgia State Conference and its leadership. There are a few people I want to thank directly. One, I want to thank both Administrator Edward DuBose and Reverend David Walker for their leadership in this time as the administrators of the Georgia State Conference. I also want to thank each and every member of the executive committee for all of the hard work that they've done. Most importantly, I want to thank our executive director, Tonza Thomas, for the nights and the early mornings and all of the work that she's done for the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP. Without any of these individuals, the success that we've achieved as the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP would not be able to be achieved, culminating in the winning of a Thelmheimer Award at the National Convention. And so I'm exceedingly excited about the new ventures I will take in my life, but I also want to thank everybody for the opportunity to lead as a Georgia State Conference president. This is not the end of my journey in the NAACP, but it's a new beginning. And I just want to thank every single voter, every single member, every single supporter, every single funder. But most importantly, I want to thank you for fighting for civil rights and social justice. I'm Attorney Gerald Griggs, eternally the 13th president of the Georgia State Conference. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of my life. I appreciate you guys. I thank you, and I look forward to marching, to continue to litigate, and continue to join with you in the push towards justice. Thank you.
And Gerald Griggs joins us live now on Nick Valencia Live. Welcome to the show, Council.
It's great to be here, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, I ran into Scotty Smart, one of your field organizers or former at the NAACP yesterday. We were talking nothing but good things to say about you, man. How do you see the Black and brown struggle intertwined? Are there any parallels there? And where can we look to bridge those similarities?
Absolutely, there are parallels, and I liked your last guest who kind of gave the parallel of Dr. King and Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
because I think that it's a mutual struggle for independence and liberation against a common oppressor. And so I think that, especially in this time right now, with the ICE raids that are happening, with the police, militarization of the police against brown and Black communities, we are seeing a lot of similarities where we can work together, whether that's in Los Angeles or Chicago, in Charlotte or Atlanta, in St. Louis or Memphis. So I think that we're seeing that, and I think we're seeing a growing coalition of the willing that's pushing back.
Do you see there being an interest, because we struggle from this disease of individualism, because we only, I think, in America care when it happens to us? Do you see there being a care about people being ripped off the streets that are documented, sometimes even American citizens, in these so-called Kavanaugh stops?
Absolutely. And I saw it initially when we first saw the first wave of the ICE deportation forces, when there was a massive protest on Beaufort Highway. It was the largest protest I'd ever seen. Almost 8,000 Atlantans were on Beaufort Highway, and that was early on. I think that was either February or March of this year. And I knew at that point that you saw a coalition growing together of white people, of Latino people, of course, of African Americans and Caribbean individuals and people from the African continent that were coming together to recognize this is an attack on all of us. So I think that those coalitions are being strengthened by the continued attack on everything that's not either Eurocentric or, for lack of a better term, white. And so I see that coalition growing. I think it's becoming more unified in that we're not all waiting for our individual community to be attacked. We're seeing, okay, if they're coming after them, they're going to come after us. So let's join with them to make sure that they don't get attacked, and so we protect ourselves as well. So we see that across the board in all communities.
And you've really led by example, Attorney Griggs. You've been out there front and center, not just in Atlanta. We also have video of you in June in Los Angeles, where you were out there demonstrating with the people in early June in those first weeks of the ICE raids happening. What took you out there? What inspired you to take that step out to Los Angeles?
Well, I have a lot of good close friends who are being affected or will be affected. And I want people to understand that, as Dr. King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice. Excuse me, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so, whether it's happening in Atlanta, Georgia, or Los Angeles, California, or Las Vegas, Nevada, where I was as well, you have to stand up and speak truth to power, both in season and out of season. So I don't have a problem joining with anybody to fight against what I believe is government overreach. And when you are clearly violating people's civil rights, let's be clear. The president is always talking about these criminal illegals. It's a civil infraction to enter the country illegally. It's a civil infraction. It's not a criminal infraction. So many of the people that are being swept up have no criminal record whatsoever. And so to criminalize those individuals without due process, without being able to be afforded the right to defend yourself in court is ridiculous, and it's un-American.
Are you surprised that we're not seeing more efforts in the courtroom to stop ICE agents on the streets and to stop this interior enforcement? Or is this just something that we need to get used to because they've got jurisdiction in the country? Border Patrol has jurisdiction within, I think it's 50 miles of a border. Every state in America feels like a border state now.
Yeah, I think that what we have is elected officials who don't have courage and who also don't understand how the Constitution works. And so I think what we have to do, we the people, the four co-equal branch, is remind them we are people, we are governed by the people at the will of the people. And so regardless if the federal government wants to violate the Constitution, we have to make sure we empower those who don't fully know their legal rights, that the Constitution still applies. And you can see that every single day in the federal court. You see the current administration lose case after case after case after case. It's almost like a record on repeat. What we saw yesterday with Letitia James and James Comey, that was a joke of an indictment that should have ever been brought. And so I think that people are starting to realize, yes, he's the chief executive officer of the executive branch, but he's not in charge of every single co-equal branch of the government, starting with the people and ending with the judiciary. And so I just think people need to understand you're not powerless. You have a right to exist. You have civil rights, and we have to enforce those in federal court and state courts. And we have to force our elected officials on the local and state level to do the same thing in state court.
One of the themes that we've picked up from the Trump administration, among the many, is that cruelty is the point. And one of the efforts that they make is to try to make things as uncomfortable for the family unit or for the individual that they self-deport. Or in the case of, like you said, James Comey and Letitia James, make it so litigious for them, wrap them up in just piles of legal paperwork that they drown and they just sort of give up. I think one of the things that people have to be prepared for these days is to be in it for the long haul. Trump has shown that he is willing to disobey court orders. He's willing to continue to move as if no one else matters but himself and his supporters. And so I think one of the things I think people really need to be prepared for is to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, this is a life fight. Justice, as Dr. King, as Coretta Scott King said, that justice and liberty and liberation is never really won. It's achieved every single generation. So people need to understand this is our generational fight. So it's not a 3-month fight, 6-month fight, 2-year fight. This is a lifetime fight because this existed before Trump. There was a belief that we have to return to a far gone era in American history, whether that's 1950s or the 1850s. And people need to understand, especially in the Black community, your ancestors prepared you for this. Now we have to make sure everybody else understands that we knew this was coming. And we have to use the tools that we were gifted from our ancestors. The legacy of struggle and winning and understanding that you must make the Constitution be what it says on paper for everybody. So, I give credit to Mr. Trump. He learned from being in courtroom after courtroom how to be in a courtroom. The only problem is he didn't learn how to win. And people need to remember that he is still on bond in Fulton County. As we learned just last month, there's a new prosecutor assigned in the election interference case. So people need to understand that this fight is not over. Mr. Trump has a history of not understanding the rule of law, and we have to remind him that the law applies to everybody. So he can run around saying he's law and order, saying that he's going to bury people in litigation. Some of us spend their entire life in a courtroom and are not afraid to fight anybody. And now we are reminding people that the law applies to everyone. So even with one of the most conservative Supreme Courts that we've had in a generation, I'm reminded of the words of Thurgood Marshall, who fought the original Jim Crow. We will bury them in litigation until the Constitution is what it says on paper for everybody.
Thanks for reminding us that the sitting president of the United States is still out on bond here because of criminal charges that he faced for trying to his effort to subvert the Electoral College and overturn the 2020 election results here in the state of Georgia. He and his co-conspirators, many of them close associates in his orbit, were charged with trying to overturn the election results here. They had a good case. It was the drama around it, surrounding Fulton County District Attorney, that sort of soured this effort. But it was very troubling for the Trump administration to be here. They saw it as a case with merit. And you reminded us here, thankfully, you reminded us that the sitting president is still out on bond here. What got you into law? What made you become a lawyer?
I've always known that I wanted to be some sort of a leader, but I watched the case in the early to mid 90s, the state of California versus O.J. Simpson, and there was a energetic, articulate lawyer that was doing some exceptional things in the courtroom, and I didn't quite understand because I think I was in either 10th or 11th grade at that point. But I saw Johnny Cochran, and I was like, I don't know what he's doing, but I want to do that, and that's what kind of sparked my interest in the law. And then, of course, learning about Thurgood Marshall and Donnelly Hollowell and Fred Gray and, these legends of civil rights, I said, yeah, that's what I want to do.
What is it that you hope to achieve, and what do you think you did achieve as the Georgia chapter president of the NAACP?
One of the biggest election turnouts in Georgia history, twice. We have rejuvenated branches and hit the highest number of memberships in the entire NAACP with over 100 branches in state conference. We've made sure that the pivotal case from 2020, the Ahmaud Arbery case, which started Freedom Summer, continues to be the convictions of William Roddy Bryant and Travis and Greg McMichael. And we've done so much to continue to empower Georgians to understand that the vote is important in Georgia. You saw it, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2024, historic turnout in Georgia. And we're going to see
it's about to be a big deal in 2026, Council.
Yeah, so we've done a lot as a Georgia State Conference, and we will continue to do a lot. But I just think that all of the success we've had is because of the people in Georgia who understand the importance of Georgia and civil rights. And so I'm just happy to have been a vessel to continue that tradition with the Georgia State Conference as the president.
We are so blessed to have you here because I've been wanting to drill down more on this, what I think is so evident to me, but I'm not sure is really evident or the prevailing wisdom. Do you think that the Democratic Party understands just how much and how much the backbone of the party is the Black woman voter?
No, I think the Democratic Party takes for granted the Black woman, especially since
they turn up every time. You can count on them every single time for every election. They save the ass of the Democrats. It's Black women.
Yeah, and I don't think that they fully understand that elections are about passion and purpose, and no one's more passionate or more purposeful than the African-American woman. But I also think the Democrats fail to realize is that people like fighters. And if you're not a fighter, you don't need to be in politics. This is not about always going along to get along. We see in this healthcare fight that completely backfired. And so I just think that there needs to be a new generation of leadership on the Democratic side. But now, as the former president of the Georgia State Conference, I try to stay nonpartisan. So I also need to think on the conservative side, the Republican side, y'all need to stop having an open Klan rally at your party. And so we just need for both parties to recognize that this country is becoming a multicultural melting pot that it was intended to be. So we need to, on one side, learn how to fight, and on the other side, learn how not to be racist.
That's right. And it starts, I believe, with Black women. That is so clear to me now. You know, it's like in the churches, out on the streets, in the statistics of who shows up. It's Black women every single time. Can you just help explain that to me and give me some clarity? What is it about the Democratic Party that their Black woman voter is drawn to, and why are they always so reliably voting Democrat?
Well, I think it started with the election of Lyndon Baines Johnson and JFK. And so in that election, we were talking about the issue of voting rights and civil rights, and Dr. King was leading the push there. And we saw a transition by the Democratic Party in the passing of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act for African Americans to switch over from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, because the Southern Democrats, the Dixiecrats, switched back over to the Republican Party. And so from that point, you've seen African Americans, because of what they received in the 60s with those civil rights acts, be very dedicated to the Democratic Party because of that. Now, over the course of time, you have seen some members of the Democratic Party, namely a few percentage points of African American men, start to be peeled off because they don't believe the Democratic Party has gone far enough from 2016 to now to continue those gains. So African American women, because they are the backbone of the family, have been consistent in their support of the Democratic Party because of the policies that have gotten us where we are. A burgeoning Black middle class, higher education gains that we've seen over a generation, and of course, economic development. And so I think that's one of the main reasons. And then, of course, the Democratic Party champions voting rights, which is access to power.
It makes me think, when I have now the curiosity of how this push of socialism that I've seen at a lot of these rallies, how that's going to land and be digested, because socialism is such a dirty word, even though we have a lot of socialist policies already in practice and in play. You know, what do you make of that? And have you seen that effort? I've seen the PSL everywhere, from Los Angeles to Chicago, Portland. I just saw them in Charlotte on Friday night.
Yeah. I think the problem with the term socialist, because I've heard a lot of the policies, and the policies really aren't socialism. The policies are really a further extension of democratic ideals. Now, the problem in the African American community with the term socialism is that we've been termed over the course of the civil rights generation as communist. And Black people don't like to be called communists. They don't like the association of communism, because in the Black community, it's a dirty word. So I don't know how much that's going to be able to peel off the core African American voter to a party that potentially could be believed to be socialist or communist. But again, I have many friends in the PSL and the Democratic Socialists, and most of their platform are highly democratic ideals. So I think that if they stick to the highly democratic ideals, they may be able to make inroads in the African American community. But if they're asking Black people to become communists, that's not going to happen.
It's not just the message, it's the messenger as well, right? It's how that message is delivered. What else do you have on your plate right now? We've got a few minutes left with you. I'd love to know what you're up to after you left the NAACP.
I mean, a lot, still working with the association, still running my law practice, just had a beautiful baby. He's 18.
Oh my goodness, congratulations.
He's driving me crazy. I'm just enjoying being a father for the second time and really just trying to see what the next chapter looks like. I'm going to always be involved in civil rights and social justice and activism. But maybe a political run is on the horizon. Who knows? There are a lot of things happening in Georgia in 2026. We may get involved in some of that. And then supporting my good friend who's running for mayor in Sandy Springs, Dante Carter, who's on the ballot. So those are just a few of the things that I'm doing. But I'm just excited about the direction that I see the people going. I haven't seen this type of energy since 2016. We're headed into a 2018 to 2020 type reemergence of democratic ideals. And I say Democrat with the small d, ideals of the people, because the resistance movement is strong. You've seen it. Yes. We haven't seen marches this big since 2020 or so. And more people are getting engaged. It's a more diverse coalition. There are more organizations that are getting active in the resistance movement, and we're starting to see cracks in this regime starting with what we are seeing already with the healthcare plan that fell apart earlier yesterday. So I just think that there are a lot of room for me to use my talents, both in the courtroom and as an activist. And so I'm just excited about where that can go. We just finished a beautiful food delivery in Southwest Atlanta where we fed over 200 families with a broad-based coalition of influencers and civic organizations and city leaders. And I think that's the future. I think people coming together to fill in the gaps, excuse me, where the government falls short, and us realizing that we can do this together. And I continue to see a broad-based coalition doing this. So that's people of good conscience that are white, that are black, that are gay, that are straight, that are church, that are unchurched, that are Latino, that are individuals from the Caribbean nations or the African nations, that are all coming together and recognizing that the politics of division don't work anymore. And we all have to come together from our lived experience, share that lived experience, and realize we have more in common than we do apart.
That's community. That's what I saw happen in Charlotte. That's what gave me hope. I couldn't let you go without asking a man involved in Georgia politics. What, WTF, man, with Marjorie Taylor Greene? WTF with MTG? What do you make of Marjorie Taylor Greene resigning, stepping down from Congress?
I think that she's finally realizing that Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump. I have to give her credit. She was loyal to a fault until he didn't endorse her for governor or senator. And she started to see the damage from his policies that are being done in her district, especially with healthcare. I mean, that's the main issue is the healthcare, the premiums that are going to skyrocket the first of the year. And so I think she said enough is enough. But now again in Georgia, we take everything with a grain of salt. We saw from 2016 to now the divisive nature of her politic, the un-Georgian type characterization of certain things. I mean, she's always on the wrong side of issues.
She was right there behind the Laken Riley Act too.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch now that she is the victim of the vitriol and the death threats and the hate. And of course, we don't wish that on anybody. But it's going to be interesting to see play out. And it's interesting that if you're going to resign, why not resign immediately? And let's have a special election immediately. But, we'll see what happens with Marjorie. I mean, she never really lived in the district, so she really wasn't from that area of Georgia. And every time I drive up there and go through that district, I just look around and be like, it's really bad up here. And she's talking about stuff that has nothing to do with Georgia. Who's going to take care of the needs of the people in that district? And so now I'm glad that there's an opportunity for them to elect somebody who cares more about Georgia politics and politics in that district than she did.
And this is an open invitation to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to be on this show. If you want to come on the show, the invite is here. The platform is open. We'd love to talk to you about why you resigned, why you stepped down, and just, give you a platform. The offer is open. Gerald Griggs, past president, counsel, all the things. You're just amazing, man. I can't say enough good things about you. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. We really appreciate it. How can we follow you? How can we keep up? Give yourself a plug here.
Yeah, man. You can follow me on all social platforms at Attorney Griggs on Instagram, Twitter, Threads. I now have a Substack, so I'm learning how to do that. YouTube, all these platforms. And I just want to give you your kudos while I'm on the platform. What I've seen you grow over the last several months on your platform. It's awesome to see new media. It's awesome to see accurate storytelling. We're seeing a lot of the mainstream media bend to the will of this administration, and the media should be the fourth co-equal branch that continues to tell the truth. So I'm seeing you do that on your platform. I hope everybody continues to like and follow and share your information so it could get out to a broader audience. And then we can continue to tell the truth about what's happening, because as your last guest said, journalism writes the first chapter of history. And so we have to journal what's happening in real time so we have accurate history. And let me add a shameless plug there for a moment on history. The African-American community knows that our history is oral. So regardless of what's put in books or put on websites or put in the atmosphere, we know the truth. So seeing this administration try to erase stuff like the Tuskegee Airmen and like Jackie Robinson and all these other things, just remember, we're the grandchildren of those individuals. We know exactly what Jackie Robinson did. We know what the Tuskegee Airmen did. You're not going to erase none of that. And what you need to understand is your tweets and your attempts to erase on the internet will be remembered the same way your grandparents' signs were when Ruby Bridges was trying to integrate elementary school. So we're here. I appreciate you building this platform because it's only going to get bigger in new media as people continue to cut off the television and turn on the computer screen and stream on their smart televisions. And I think that this platform is going to be one of the biggest ones on the internet. So I appreciate you growing this.
Council, we believe that, and I have goosebumps hearing you from your lips to God's ears. We really feel like this is a higher driven purpose mission, and that things happen for us, not to us. And I'm right where I need to be. We're right in the middle of these conversations now, and I get to speak truth and stand up for our community, because journalism at its best is an act of service, and we're here to serve. So thank you so much for saying that, for giving us our flowers. Gerald Griggs, you're welcome back on the show anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I was the past president here of the Georgia chapter of the NAACP. That felt good to hear. And I want to talk about what happened yesterday. I was at the zoo in Atlanta with my children, and one of you guys, one of our viewers here not from CNN, but from Nick Valencia News, from NVN, she said, "Nick!" And I thought, somebody that I knew, I turn around and it's a viewer. It's somebody who I follow you on IG. And it was really cool. It was very special. Not that we do it for that sort of stuff, but that feels good, because it means that you guys are listening, you guys are watching, and to see the enthusiasm in her face, like you can't fake that stuff. That means that what we are doing and what we are saying really is making a difference and making an impact. One of the big differences is that we get up in the morning, Eric and I, my wife Rachel, we talk and strategize. Eric sends me what he sees, what he's watching, and we jump on here and we blast it out to a platform that every single day is growing. There was a clip there where our platform on Instagram was growing by like 1,000 viewers per week. It's just insane to see the kind of traction. And that to me says that we need more of this stuff. We need to continue to invest in it. Those are the kinds of affirmations that keep us going in this space, because it is dark out there, literally and figuratively. It's getting darker earlier, but it's also dark to see this kind of unlawful, brutal, just terrorizing of communities. And yet we see these communities band together in the face of this adversity. The coalition of community that is coming together to stand up and resist the fascism that we're seeing on the streets. It used to be, those words, oh my God, how can you call the president a fascist? It's becoming more and more easy to do so. He even jokes about it. He was in the Oval Office with the new mayor-elect of New York, Zohan Mamdani, and he's like, go ahead, just call me a fascist. It is what it is. I don't think he's joking. And whether or not you believe in it, or whether or not you want to split hairs about language, the fact of the matter is we're seeing people targeted simply because of the color of their skin. And if you don't believe me, just go look at our social media. Right before we came on here, there was yet another video from Ontario, California this morning of a man whose only crime, it appeared, was that he was driving while brown. Those are the facts. When DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says that no American citizens are being caught up in this, she means no white American citizens, because we know the truth. We can see it with our own eyes. That's why it's so important for us to dig in, drill down, and be here for the long haul, make truth go viral. And as always, guys, have a great day on purpose. Thank you.